to everyone. We're going to start the session this morning. I'm going to start with a few introductory remarks, and then we'll hand over to Professor Fiona Tregenna to take over the rest of the session. I just wanted to, okay, we have about 88 people already joining us. We are expecting a few more, but I'll start with my opening remarks so long, and then people can join along the way. Okay. So morning, everyone. Morning to Professor Oqubay, Professor Tregenna, colleagues and friends. Welcome to the TIPS Forum 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed how we work and has impacted on us in unusual and different ways. We are very pleased that the technology allows us to proceed this year with the annual TIPS Forum. As you would have seen, we've adjusted the format so that instead of the usual 1.5 days that we have, which included several parallel sessions, we are now running the forum over 4 mornings. We hope that this format allows us to avoid Zoom fatigue, which many of us get after too many hours in front of the computer. And the sessions are also slightly shorter. And we've asked presenters to stay within the time allocated so that we can have time for discussion, as well as time for them to share their insights in their papers. The benefits of having a virtual forum has allowed us to reach a broader audience who would not always be able to attend the event. We have over 300 people who have registered for this forum, and as we talk, more people are joining the forum. So in addition to the colleagues from Africa, we've also got colleagues from across the world. So we've got from several parts of South Africa who've been able to join us today. And we also have delegates registered from Namibia, Botswana, Zambia, Cameroon, Ethiopia, Kenya, Eswatini, Lesotho, Uganda, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. We also have registered delegates from Spain, Japan, USA, France, Brazil, Hong Kong, and the UK. I hope I'm not leaving anyone out, but we really have a fantastic mix of people who've been able to register and will join us during the course of the 4 mornings for the conference. We also have a mix of government officials. So we've got mix of participants. We've got government officials, we've got academics and researchers and students. We've got participants from state-owned companies, as well as international organizations. And there are also several from private sector companies, as well as industry associations who are joining us at the forum. So it's an interesting mix of people, and it's the mix of people we usually get at the TIPS Forum. We just now a lot broader and further afield. So while we will miss the social interaction and networking that we usually have at the forum, we are really excited by who's been able to join us today and the variety of countries and people that we're able to get through using this format. We look forward to your contribution and your comments during discussion time, and also on the chat group. Please share your insights and comments along the way. And then there's a Q&A question box on the chat, and please put in your questions as well. We'll also be able to unmute people to talk and to share their questions and comments along the way. We're also using social media as part of our digital approach. So if you want to tweet, please do so. You can tweet on the TIPS News Twitter page and use the hashtag TIPS Forum 2020. We are also able to record the sessions, and I think the speakers, we've asked your consent to record, and our keynote speech from today will be uploaded by this afternoon on the TIPS website. We also, the issue of regional industrial development is a key area of research, including for TIPS, and it informs an important part of our research agenda. We see this as critical to economic development, and the efforts to strengthen regional industrial development is an important component of economic integration. and it builds on the efforts currently underway to strengthen Africa-wide integration through the AFCFTA. So seeing industrial development alongside the trade and the collaboration across Africa is absolutely critical. We need to support industrial development as a means to ensure that we reap the benefits of the larger markets and the borders that are opening up. The importance of regional industrial development is even more critical in the face of the COVID-19 recovery plans. There's a need to look at the alternative approaches that come out of this and that would result in strengthening our industrial base across the region. And importantly, not just in one or two of the stronger economies in the region. So it must be broad-based and supported across the region. As TIPS, we've been looking at these issues and we've been running TIPS forums almost every year since our establishment 24 years ago. The purpose of our forum hasn't changed, and we look at having policy relevant research presented and debated. And we are continuing that in this format this year. Aside from this opening session and the keynote address, the themes in the panel sessions for this year are trade and trade reform in Africa, inclusive industrial development, strengthening and building regional value chains, sustainable regional industrial development, low carbon and inclusive industrial development, and financing industrial development, theory, policy, and practice. We have a number of excellent papers that will be presented at the conference. In previous years, as I've noted, we've had parallel sessions which force people to choose between the different papers. The format this year means we don't have that dilemma, and all participants will be able to attend all sessions if they choose to. We're hopeful that in organizing this forum and presenting these papers, that we're making an important contribution to the thinking in the space, and that we are adding new insights and debates into the discussion. And that the research efforts of all those who are presenting their papers and sharing the insights will add value and support efforts toward improved policy making. I'd like to thank all those that have made this conference possible. It takes a huge effort to hold an event such as this, and it's a strong team that makes it happen. Our partners in the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, the DTRC, the South African Research Chair in Industrial Development at the University of Johannesburg, and the SARChI program of UNU-WIDER. Our partners in these events are important as they bring a wealth of knowledge and provide support in many different ways. The members of the steering committee who have contributed to ensuring a high quality and very relevant program, we thank you. Our keynote speaker, Professor Oqubay, the presenters and the researchers who have prepared papers and presentations, our session moderators, thank you. Our very supportive board as TIPS, who have given us guidance and assistance to ensure that TIPS continues with these important initiatives, and of course the internal TIPS team, in particular Baba, who's successfully coordinated the conference this year with the support of Lesego, Roselle, Daphne, and Tasha, who've all worked extremely hard to ensure a successful conference using an entirely different medium. Thank you. I'm looking forward to an exciting forum, and I hope that most of you will be able to join us for the full conference. It's a good opportunity to engage with the issues that are confronting us, debate with colleagues, and to share our ideas and knowledge. I hope that you enjoy the forum and you actively participate in the discussions. I thank you. I now would like to hand over to Fiona, who will moderate the rest of the session. Thank you very much. Fiona?
Move your video. Oh, okay. I think one advantage of the virtual format that we're having this year is that we're able to receive this keynote address, which perhaps would not have been possible in our usual format in person due to his busy schedule. I think he has a really unique profile as both a scholar and a policymaker. He's currently a senior minister and a special advisor to the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, the third Prime Minister with whom he's played this role. I think people here will be familiar with the remarkable success story of growth and industrialization in Ethiopia, with its very active industrial policies and impressive results. Ethiopia is well known for its industrial parks, for its manufacturing growth and upgrading at a time when many countries in Africa and around the world are struggling to industrialize. as well as for its success story of Ethiopian Airways, for its rapid GDP growth, and so on. And while there are, of course, many people and institutions who've contributed to these policies and outcomes in various ways, it's fair to say that one person who has played a key role in all of this over a long period of time is Arkebe. He's been at the heart of Ethiopia's development processes in various roles, including previously as a mayor of Addis and in many leadership and policy-making roles that are really too numerous to mention. And then alongside all of that, he's also a scholar who holds a PhD from SOAS and continues to be a very active researcher. His sole-authored monograph, Made in Africa, has been very influential both in academic and policy debates, and he's authored or edited a number of other volumes. This includes the recent book on African economic development, co-authored with Chris Kramer and John Sender, that came out last month. The Oxford Handbook on Industrial Hubs and Economic Development, co-edited with Justin Lin, that came out this month. The Oxford Handbook of Industrial Policy, that will come out later this year. And a number of other volumes, including, I'm pleased to say that he and I are co-editing, along with Imran Valodia, the Oxford Handbook of the South African Economy, that will come out next year. And he has prominent affiliations with many academic and policy institutions around the world, and fortunately also as of recently with UJ. So this is just really a flavor of his remarkable bio. And I think we can say that if every African country had an Arkebe, perhaps industrialization across the continent would be more advanced today than it is. And he really is an ideal person to deliver a keynote address at the TIPS Forum, with a focus here being on policy-oriented research, and in particular with this year's theme of regional industrial development. There will be time after his address for a Q&A session. So please, to all of the attendees, do type your questions in the Q&A tab rather than in the chat box. And these can be sent through even while he's speaking, and I'll present them afterwards. Time permitting, we'll also have some rounds of questions. So thank you very much, Arkebe, for making time for this keynote address, and we're looking forward to hearing it.
Much, Fiona, and thank you, Saul. First, I would like to mention that I'm really honored to present keynote address to this important forum, TIPS Forum, and I'm very astonished that this forum has been continuing for almost a quarter of a century, and I believe it will have significant contribution to academic and policy-oriented debates and researches. I would also like to thank all sponsors and partners of this TIPS Forum. COVID-19, this forum is being conducted at the time of COVID-19. But we all know that COVID-19 is not a virus pandemic, but it goes far beyond that. It's a public health emergency. It's also a deeper economic crisis. It's also a crisis that involves political and social dimension. So this TIPS Forum discussions, it will be difficult to isolate from the situation of COVID-19. The team, Regional Industrial Development, and the 4 sub-teams are critical, and I believe they touch the key aspects of regional industrial development. I believe that there are 3 important pillars to understand these issues. The first one is we need to have an understanding of industrialization and industrial policy. The second aspect is as it deals about regional development or regional cooperation, it also requires understanding African perspective and regional cooperation among African countries. The third aspect is the national development programs and the regional cooperations, it would be difficult to isolate from the global patterns and global context. So because it affects FDI flow, it affects trade, it affects economic cooperation, and now crisis, which is even much worse than 2008 financial crisis and the deepest crisis since the depression of the early 1930s. It's absolutely important to reflect on this aspect. Also, this is a crisis which hasn't yet fully evolved. Having said this, first I would like to talk about industrial policy and the industrialization, because if we have to talk about industrial development, we have to talk about the policy, about productive transformation. Historically, as we all know, industrial policy has been well known to contribute to catch up in economic transformation. But we also know that at theoretical level and empirical level, this has been true. I would like to highlight on 2020 how the debate, the conversation is shifting. If we look at the current crisis in the US, one of the most recent bipartisan bill, which has been proposed by the three members of the legislative body, Schumer, Khanna, and Gallagher. This will highlight to us how industrial policy is becoming central. According to this so-called Endless Frontier Act, named after one of the key scientists who played a critical role during World War II and later on in innovation advancement after World War II, the central focus, according to Schumer, is that the COVID-19 pandemic has shown the science and technology gap between the US and the rest of the world is closing fast. He is referring about catch-up, he is referring about lagging. And he's also focusing on science and technology. Khanna adds, to win the 21st century, we need to invest in the technologies of the future. This means increasing public funding into those sectors that drive innovation and create new jobs. Here again, the focus is on creating new jobs, on driving innovation, on putting public funding, and also technology of the future. Gallagher adds that in order to ensure China does not gain technological superiority, we need to make proactive investment in strategic technologies. Again, here, it talks about China, which is a key competitor now, and also it talks about proactive investment, about strategic technologies. And according to this bipartisan proposed bill, it focuses on 10 technologies, including artificial intelligence, quantum computing, genomics and biotechnology, and advanced engineering. Even if we look at the crude thinking of Trump in his own way, the central slogan has been Made in America. So this highlights us the debate, the conversation in the leading and the most innovative economy of our time. But it's not limited to the US. In Europe as well, this is a conversation which is now central in countries like France and Germany. As we all know, Germany is the economic powerhouse of Europe, and it's an European giant. And if we look at recent speeches by Angela Merkel in April, May, we see the shifting conversation and debates. The Premier says, in view of the fact that PPE market is currently based in Asia, it's important that we learn as an experience from this pandemic that we need a certain amount of sovereignty, or at least a pillar of domestic production here. And she adds, at any rate, we need capacity here. She is referring on prevention and on personal protection equipment like face mask, but it's becoming central to the policy and the debate. And the emphasis is that this affects sovereignty, and this is important to be produced in Europe. Merkel adds, we will also think very specifically. And I think after this crisis, we'll do this even more specifically about how to create European champions. Here, central concept is European champions and a specific policy and targeted approach. She adds, we have seen that others, whether the United States of America, South Korea, Japan, or China, have relied very heavily on global champions. And I believe this approach is the necessary answer. We must not be afraid to have global champions, but we must work towards them. Here again, central concept is global champions, not just merely national champion or European champion, but global champions. So we see that active industrial policy is guiding the thinking in economies like Germany. And this the stimulus package has primarily focused on supporting the production of electric cars, innovations in new energy, green industry, artificial intelligence, etc. But this thinking is not only limited to countries like in Europe and the US. In developing and in emerging economies as well, it will be sufficient to look at the approach of China. China has been following an active industrial policy in the last 40 years, and it has contributed to its economic transformation as well as its technological catch-up. And this has made China as the engine of global economy. China currently contributes 30% to the annual growth of global economy, almost 1/3. And it also contributes 16% of global GDP. Its contribution to global GDP was only 1% by new millennium. And it's also the manufacturing powerhouse, as 27% of global manufacturing capacity is located in China. So China had focused on manufacturing and industrial capacity, on exports. It has become the largest exporting economy, on attracting productive FDI and building domestic capability, in promoting innovation, and in many technologies, Chinese companies are emerging to lead, including in e-commerce, as well as 5G telecom systems. And it has focused on national champions, both state-owned as well as private. But China has also used special economic zones as a key strategy, not just limited policy, but strategy to serve as a vehicle to this. China also has shown us how a country can integrate with global economy and how it can insert in global value chain that will gradually serve as an opportunity. And after the new millennium, China also joined WTO and has been able to tap the benefits and to operate also within the constraints of World Trade Organizations. So this tells us that African countries could learn from this. Industrial policy and industrialization is a central agenda in advanced economies as well as in emerging and developing countries. The second issue I would like to highlight is how COVID has shown also how industrial policy has been demonstrated during the COVID crisis. And it's quite interestingly, quite vivid that countries that have built industrial capacities through industrial policy have really shown that they have been distinct in fighting COVID-19. The best comparison is the United States, United Kingdom, and Brazil on one side, and comparing with Germany, China, Taiwan, South Korea, and Singapore. Although it's not much told, Taiwan, South Korea, and Singapore has shown extraordinary performance. Taiwan, the infected cases are only 448, and only 4 were dead. And these apparently smaller economies have been able to demonstrate how innovation and technology can be applied to public health emergencies. They have been extremely using artificial intelligence. China has also demonstrated how to fight COVID-19. What we also see is that these countries have learned from SARS and MERS, especially Singapore, and even COVID-19. When COVID-19 was first identified in China, Taiwan and South Korea and Singapore has been able to follow and take timely measures. In addition to this, the COVID-19 also exposed that service sector is not everything. Service sector is dominant in advanced economies, but it was shown that it's not immune from being slowing down, and this is against the fashionable assertion that services are important, but manufacturing is not the feature. So this COVID-19 demonstrated that again, exports is important and manufacturing is important. We have seen countries like China having quick economy recovery. The economic stimulus allocated by many countries, especially the US, Japan, and Germany, is close to 10 trillion. However, the economic recovery in China is quite fast. In the second quarter of 2020, the economy showed 3% growth, and the PMI of manufacturing increased about 50% in manufacturing and also 54% in services. And China also showed that the depth of its global value chain is unmatched and that it has been resilient. So these are important issues we need to learn from COVID-19, and it shows that industrial policy and the policy approach of countries who have gained experience in learning in industrial policy have been able to fight COVID-19 more effectively. So in brief, the industrial policy, industrial capacity has to put in place and focus on jobs creation, on domestic capability and exports or industrial capacity, on priority sectors, on national champions, on increasingly focus on innovation and technology. And these are important guides for Africa. Having said some introduction about the global patterns and industrial policy, I would like to highlight on our continent. Our continent has been able to achieve a modest growth after 2000. So in about 19 years, from 2001, economy on average has been growing at continent level 4.6%, which is higher than the global average growth rate. And since 2015, it has slowed, but still the economy has been able to grow by about 3.5% annually. However, this growth has not been even among countries. It has been uneven and there is variation. There are some countries who have made significant performance, who have shown relatively better performance, and there are some countries who who haven't showed a similar growth pattern. I would like to talk something on Ethiopia. I'm talking about Ethiopia because I know better about Ethiopia rather than about the other countries. Currently in Ethiopia, COVID is a major issue as it's in South Africa and other countries. So far, Ethiopia has witnessed 15,000 cases, which is not big, comparing in contrast to its population, 110 million, and the deaths has been close to 230 fatalities. And Ethiopia hasn't introduced a national lockdown, and it's a government's policy not to pursue national lockdown, considering the unique situation we have. In response to the economic dimension as well as the public health emergency, Ethiopian government has primarily focused on taking medium and strong measures, and it primarily focused on the prevention oriented and the primary health care system, because our economic level is limited, our technological capacity is limited, and it will be unrealistic to to defeat COVID without this prevention system. So it has focused primarily on community awareness and taking the public measures. On the economic side, its economy is limited and it cannot support firms to sufficient level. So the approach has been to provide targeted support to export and manufacturing sectors, and also trying to take some measures that will help the vulnerable groups, but we all know that this is will have limited impact. So if I highlight the responses in relation to companies which are focused on export-oriented, I would like to focus on two areas. One is Ethiopian Airlines. Ethiopian Airlines is important as a national champion, but also it's the largest single company that brings export earnings from services sector. So it contributes close to $5 billion export earnings, and it employs direct and indirect more than 50,000. And it's critical to the policies related with exports, national security, because we are landlocked country, and it contributes to know-how transfer. And Ethiopian Airlines has been growing quite fast in recent times, and it has gone through very difficult times. 2020, or the COVID crisis, was the most testing time for aviation industry globally, even much more severe than the 9/11 or 2008 financial crisis. So the passenger industry has gone flat. Almost 90% of all destinations closed, and the passenger business almost drying out. And Ethiopian Airlines had to survive on its own. The government of Ethiopia doesn't have resources to support, to provide rescue package. And it was quite clear to Ethiopian policymakers, board, the management, so it has to swim, survive. And until the end of June, which is the end of fiscal year in Ethiopia, it has been able to survive without making any loss. It retained its 16,000 employees, direct employees, and it didn't cut any benefits, and it didn't want to lay off workers, because we believe that after COVID-19, there is going to be an opportunity for expansion. So the airlines has to show resilience by switching, moving to cargo industry. So it has to double productivity of cargo planes. it had to convert more than 25 aircrafts to air freighting, and air freighting became central. It also focused and targeted like international charters during the in March and April, and this has helped it to survive, and it also cut its costs. It's also trying to diversify to other businesses, and its hotel business has been doing quite well. And the other subsidiaries, such as the technical infrastructure, has also been increasing their operations. And it has been a major operator also in airlifting medical goods, especially COVID-related, in Africa, Latin America, as well as many places. From the very beginning, it took a very responsible measures. For instance, when COVID-19 was evident, was detected in China, many airlines stopped flying to China, and Ethiopian Airlines scaled up its precaution and its measures, but it never stopped flying to China. And the key policy, guiding policy, is that as it did during the Ebola crisis, Ethiopian Airlines believes that it has to continue its operations even during pandemics when air services are required more. So in the West African Ebola pandemic period, it was only airline flying to these African countries. So Ethiopian Airlines does have huge challenge. Again, the next 24 months is going to be gloomy, and we believe it's going to be much worse, the environment in the aviation industry. But the key point is it has to prove its resilience, and it has to apply active industrial policy to survive. On the industrialization side, I would like to bring industrial parks, which Fiona highlighted. Ethiopia adopted a unique approach to industrial parks. We have seen in many African countries where parks has been operating, like in Senegal, industrial parks were built since the 1970s. In countries like Nigeria, since 1980s. And Ethiopia didn't have a single industrial park up to 2010. So it was only in the last decade that Ethiopia focused on industrial hubs. And the government was quite clear that it was important to understand why many industrial parks fail in our continent, and also why industrial parks or special economic zones succeeded in some Asian countries. So a new strategy, a new policy was developed, and based on it, the new policy focused especially on carbon neutral parks development, or eco-industrial parks. It primarily focused on domestic linkages and creating a learning and business ecosystem. So in the last 5 years, the country has been able to construct a national network of industrial parks, and currently there are more than 20 industrial parks owned by the federal government, regional government, as well as private developers. And during this pandemic, it was quite critical to ensure that these industrial parks continue to thrive. And the big challenge was the companies which are located in these industrial parks faced major crisis because of the disruption in global value chain, and also lockdown in advanced economies. So buyers and global brands ordered companies to stop production, to stop exports. So during this time, it was important to discuss with these companies and to jointly move forward. And here the key focus was how to ensure industrial parks continue production while the COVID pandemic is there. So industrial parks didn't stop production, and And the industrial parks have been exemplary in introducing extraordinary measures to ensure workers are not affected by COVID-19 infection. So factories has to be disinfected daily basis. Industrial parks have to be disinfected on daily basis. New directives and restrictions were made. Thermoscanners were introduced in all parks. So a new discipline was required to ensure protection and prevention is introduced. In addition to this, it was important to ensure factories are not closed. And the government, in its state of emergency, also introduced that companies cannot lay off workers. And in order to support these companies, the government jointly designed that companies would shift, would be restructured to produce PPE for domestic and exports. And currently, more than 25 companies are producing PPE sufficient for domestic as well as partly for exports. And also, the government is making preparation to start production of PCR diagnostic kits in September for the country as well as for the continent. So shifting and repurposing the production system for PPE was absolutely important. And also new support schemes were introduced. For instance, export logistics was made free. Rail transport was made free, and companies don't have to pay for the coming few months. Ethiopian Airlines introduced a very favorable pricing, which was effective before the COVID-19. Now air transport fares has increased, and additional mechanism to improve cash flow were introduced. Again, so far the companies have been able to survive, but the big challenge is ahead of us. So in brief, the focus in the industrialization path of Ethiopia has been primarily to pursue active industrial policy, to focus on learning, and also to prove resilience during this difficult time. And from this, Africa would learn or could learn that, as we have seen also during COVID-19, the critical importance and the centrality of economic diversification, and that job creation and protection of jobs is central, and also focusing on selective and targeted intervention is also key. Here, manufacturing has to be at the forefront, and manufacturing is, from my perspective, central to many African countries. But when we talk about manufacturing, we also mean high productivity activities such as aviation, as we have seen in the operations of Ethiopian Airlines, and also modern agriculture. In 2019 and 2020, which the fiscal year which just ended the end of June, Ethiopia was able to export close to $500 million from horticulture. And this is quite an important industry that has that creates a lot of jobs. And we have to focus on manufacturing, because manufacturing not only creates a significant number of manufacturing jobs. If you look at apparel and textile, for instance, it creates 60 to 70 million jobs globally. But the key benefit is indirect jobs are created. Every single direct manufacturing jobs creates about 2.2 indirect jobs. So again, focusing on industrialization is quite important. Lastly, I would like to talk about regional cooperation and economic integration, as this is also a sub-theme of TIPS Forum in 2020. The first thing that should be highlighted is that the regional cooperation and economic integration process could not have occurred without the conducive political process of economic integration. This initiative has been championed by African Union and African leaders, and the political facilitating processes included the move from OAU, which was established in 1963, to African Union Commission now. Also the initiative related with NEPAD, where South African leaders also played a critical role. Peer reviews, these were some of the initiatives in institutional reform of African Union. In addition to this, in the last decade, African Union has been active in peace building and conflict resolution. And most recently, as you know, African Union was the leading the dialogue between Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia in relation to the Grand Renaissance Dam, and it has been able to conduct this role with wisdom. In relation to pandemic, also African continent learned how to fight Ebola pandemic last few years, and from this pandemic also it has been able to learn. And as you know, Africa CDC was founded based on the experience of Ebola pandemic. And I'm proud to say that during this COVID-19 pandemic, this continent and almost all African governments has been able to take a very responsible and effective measure that suits their respective condition. We cannot say strategy X or strategy Y is correct, but every government has taken timely and bold action. And the reason that the COVID-19 infection in this continent is still below 1 million, which is about 4% of the global coverage, is not because of lack or tropical weather. It's mainly African governments took measures that will help them to prevent their and protect their population. So this is absolutely important to understand the economic integration and regional cooperation. The other very important recent initiative is the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, or AFCFTA, which has been initiated especially spearheaded by United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. And this organization has done excellent job in promoting this agenda. We have seen advances made from regional unions such as SADC and COMESA and other alliances, 8 or 9. We have also seen some progresses made to implement this new agreement. However, I would like to highlight 2 important fundamental issues. First, we must understand that the trade among African countries cannot substitute international trade or export to other countries. This continent needs to engage and needs to export to advanced economies, to emerging economies. It has to interact with other global players. So we shouldn't see this as the sole solution in terms of trade performance. And we have to use this also to develop regional value chains, and we have to fully exploit the benefits that can be gained from this. This is one basic fundamental issue. But the second point is to make this effective, let's say to a similar level to ASEAN, there are important interventions required and key constraints. One key constraint is infrastructure. Without the development of infrastructure across the continent, across national boundaries, as far as connectivity is not improved, energy is not improved, this continent is not going to benefit from this free trade agreement. So this requires the attention of policymakers. This requires the focus of all policymakers. A second aspect is without development of productive investment, it's not possible to benefit. So this free trade agreement has to go side by side. And in fact, it's even more important to concentrate on improving and building productive capacity. This will help us to attract businesses, to attract FDI, to create more jobs. Because ultimately, this trade benefit, the development of regional value chain, would require competitive firms, and also to benefit from jobs creation, we have to build the productive investment of African countries. And we have also to link with the new, with the changes and shifts within the global value chain. The global value chain has been tested during this period. And with the exception of China, almost the disruption has affected all countries. In China, the effect was mainly in January and February, but China is the only country which has the deepest and a fully integrated and comprehensive value chain. So this global value chain is now shifting, is now impacting the thinking of companies, global players, multinational corporations, transnational corporations. And some advanced economies are, as we know, announcing that jobs should be brought back home, which may not be viable. So here we see two important consequences of this COVID-19 effect on global value chain. One is a bigger opportunity for regional value chain. So Africa does have an opportunity to benefit from this process. A second aspect is the importance of building a simple and flexible value chain, and the importance of developing domestic linkages, verticality, and productive investment. This is going to be much more important in the coming years. And we also need to understand and to observe how this value chain progresses. Finally, my conclusion remarks would be, first, Africa needs to see beyond COVID-19. Now, all governments and policymakers are focused on existing emergency case of COVID-19. But the worst is going to come, and the worst is going to occur after perhaps COVID-19 has been fully contained. However, we need to understand that COVID-19 is going to stay with us. It's not going to end in 5 months, 6 months. We can only say COVID-19 is addressed when universally applied and widely made available vaccine reaches to 1.2 billion population of our continent. And this is going to take 2-3 years minimum. So this is one issue we need to understand. So we cannot leave everything and only everything and focus on the other strategic issues. The second aspect we need to understand is we have heard about stimulus by advanced economies, by some big economies. And more than 10 trillion stimulus has been announced by many countries. And it's important to understand this may not change the landscape of the post-COVID-19 crisis. We remember that the 2019 financial crisis, also through bailouts, the risks have been contained, but the economy never rebounded to pre-2019, 2009 financial crisis level. And the fear is that this 10 trillion stimulus may not create a more dynamic economy globally. The economic slowdown is going to continue. The main reason is many of the stimulus packages or recovery packages are not well designed. They are badly designed. And also, there is no global collaboration. There is no coherent approach globally. So this is going to undermine the effect of the recovery process. And a big uncertainty is there. Uncertainty in every industry. uncertainty in many national economies. So we are going to operate within this environment. Economic crisis is going to affect globally, as the global economy is going to contract by close to 5%, according to IMF's estimation, about 4.9%. FDI is going to shrink in 2020 by $500 billion. 2019 it was 1.5 trillion, and now it will be below 1 trillion. And the trade war is now being scaled up and is even becoming apparently like a Cold War. You may have listened to Pompeo, the Secretary of State Department, his speech last week, which shows the whole jargons are similar to the Cold War time. So this looms a big risk for our continent. In Africa, the economy is going to contract by about 3%, but it's uneven across countries. It will be between 3 to 10% in different countries. And the national lockdowns have also affected many economies. According to ECA's estimate, a national lockdown for 1 month costs $65 billion. So I don't foresee other national lockdowns in the coming months or year, but the effect is not going to be easy or small. So this continent has to focus in the coming decade. First, it has to focus on public health, building public health infrastructure, and building a response system. This is absolutely important because whatever we have gained on the economic side, we are just losing it in a global pandemic within a year or 2 years. And the human resource development, skills development will be affected by such pandemics. So the first thing is public health infrastructure and response system. The second focus should be on economic transformation. We have seen the vulnerability of the economy in our continent. We have seen petroleum producing countries who have not diversified being affected significantly. So diversification is going to be important. We have to focus jobs. Every industrial policy strategy has to put job creation as central and productive capacity development as central. And we have also to focus on exports. Third pillar would be, in terms of international collaboration strategy, we have seen that the advanced economies, or even many members of G20, they were reluctant to assist this continent. So we cannot look at international community to save this continent. We have to survive on our own. This is an important consideration. So here we need to focus on intra-Africa integration. Also, its impact will be will have its own limitation. Secondly, we need to reject weaponization of aid. We have seen many countries, including European countries, trying to use aid for political purpose, political end. We have also to diversify economic partnership and economic ties. And here I'm clearly saying Africa needs to engage with China. China is an important economy to engage with. If we have to attract manufacturing industry, we need to target China. We also need to look at a win-win collaboration, improving also the trade imbalance between the continent and China. So these are all within the international collaboration strategy. And fourth, nothing is going to happen with weak governments. So we need to focus on having an activist and development-oriented governments and states. Thank you very much.
profound and relevant keynote address. This is the moment where if we were all together in person, there would be a round of applause, but unfortunately you'll just have to settle for my heartfelt thank you. So we'll open for questions. We'll take one round of questions which have been submitted through the Q&A box. I will just try to paraphrase those, because I think it might be difficult to read quickly now. And then we'll follow that with a round of spoken questions. For those, will people please raise their hands electronically, and Baba will unmute you. So I'm just going to collate 5 of the questions, only one per person, that have been asked through the Q&A box. And perhaps you can just see how to address them together, and perhaps be quite brief, because we have a number of people who would like to ask. So the first question is, in the case of China, how much of a role has its massive domestic market played in its ability to industrialize, and is this a constraint on smaller economies? Secondly, how do we ensure that regional value chains complement each other rather than compete with each other? So how do we coordinate these to avoid many countries having RVCs in the same industries? Thirdly, how do we industrialize in the face of WTO rules that make import substitution difficult? Can you reflect on the experience of Ethiopia? Fourthly, you mentioned that Ethiopian Airways was able to convert to freight carrying, and industrial parks were able to switch to manufacturing of PPEs during this period. What role did government interventions play in these switches, and what were the challenges? And perhaps the last one, because I think that's already a lot, is that we see Chinese malls in many countries. Does this displace local manufacturing? Or does it assist in any way with local industrialization? So back to you, Arkebe.
Minutes do I have? Thank you, Fiona. And these are very important questions. The first thing is, in China, the domestic market is quite huge. As we may know now, China's GDP is close to 16 trillion, and the GDP per capita is close to is almost $10,000. And during this pandemic, it has slowed down first quarter by -2 contraction, but it rebounded quite fast in second quarter. And I have been checking with some observers, also in businesses operating in China, and almost uniformly they said in China almost all shopping malls, markets are functioning as they used to be in 2019, and companies who have been selling in local market now do not have any contraction or any decrease in terms of sales. So the market has rebounded quite effectively. And next year, the GDP growth of China is estimated to be quite positive, although there are many uncertainties. And as I indicated earlier, the PMI in manufacturing and services is above 50%, which shows expansion. On the second point is the regional value chain. Building regional value chain is not going to be an easy thing. And as I indicated earlier, the main reason that I highlighted that we also need to focus on engaging with in international trade, exporting to Europe, exporting to US, exporting to China is so that there is sufficient space for building a thriving regional value chain. And there is going to be obviously competition because there is similarity of goods produced, and this is linked to development of productive capacity. That's why I emphasize it's critical for countries to develop firms and to develop productive capacity. And this capacity development is not going to only be limited to local. We must try and do our best to attract relatively high quality FDI inflow as well. And this is linked with the another question which was presented, how Ethiopian government was able to cope with Chinese investment, also crowding out in other industries that would have to benefit local companies. And here there is, I mean, if we look at the McKinsey study conducted in 2018, this is a study that had the biggest firms, number of firms surveyed, and they surveyed 1,000 firms across the continent. And they estimated that the number of Chinese firms in this continent in 2017 and 18 was 10,000. And what they found out was it was only 30% of these companies were involved in manufacturing. However, they observed there was significant difference across countries. And they came up to situation in Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, 70% of Chinese companies are in manufacturing. Only 30% in the services sector, agriculture, or other industries. And Chinese are not permitted in retail shops, small businesses. And this 70% of these firms who are in manufacturing are almost 100% private companies. And this is because of the government's policy, targeted policy, focusing on manufacturing, because the FDI inflow in Ethiopia between 2010 and until last year, more than 85% of FDI inflow is in manufacturing. This is a targeted government policy, and also targeting bigger companies who can survive, targeting who play critical in this global value chain. So this is linked with the investment policy on how to attract companies in manufacturing. Companies who have been attracted to manufacturing, they have to operate in industrial parks, which provides a very productive ecosystem. And the government has also been generous in providing them with good incentives. So this is one aspect I would like to highlight. On WTO rules, I think more discussions could be conducted, and I think the research center led by Fiona also, they have made many researches. And the key point is, although WTO puts a constraint on developing countries, but there is more than sufficient leeway to benefit even within the existing governance system. But we also see now currently the WTO system is being undermined, especially by Trump administration. So this will give room and space for African countries to operate. This will require more discussion, but the key point is, and this is also discussed in detail in our recent book, which was released last month, African Economic Development, Evidence, Theory and Policy, co-authored with Kramer and Sender, which is an open access, which you can freely download. And this is broadly discussed in this literature as well. On the Ethiopian Airlines and PPE, the government didn't provide a single penny to Ethiopian Airlines. Not because it doesn't believe it should be supported, but it does because it doesn't have any resource. The treasury doesn't have much cushion. its cover is limited. So Ethiopian Airlines didn't receive any assistance from the government, and it had to survive on its own. And it did until June. And this year, its overall sales and revenue will decrease, but it has aimed to reduce its losses, and I'm optimistic it will survive. On the PPE manufacturing, it's, as I indicated earlier, additional supports have been given, like allowing rail transport freely, and also reducing dry port costs to 50%. And Ethiopian Airlines also came with a unique package to provide support, even operating at break even. Fiona.
Okay. Thank you. The questions are still coming in on the Q&A in the chat. Can I just check, Baba, whether there are hands of people? Firstly, what is your comment about the current stimulus programs that governments are undertaking in the context of COVID in relation to future debt burdens for African countries? And secondly, how will the economic and technology war affect Africa's relations with China and the US? How should African countries respond to pressure to choose sides in this war? There are more questions, but I think because of time, we'll unfortunately have to leave it at those two.
Yeah, the stimulus package uniform in different countries. If we look at the 3 trillion economic recovery package of the US, we can see major weaknesses. First is it's badly designed, according to leading scholars and economists such as Stiglitz and others. So the key problem is it's badly designed. The second point is designing a stimulus package. Making the decision is easy, but implementing is totally complicated. How do you ensure, for instance, that every household receives $300 or 300 euro every month? How are you going to channel it? Does it arrive on time? Are they going to get it through outside their work home or direct? So it's too complicated, and it has been seen that stimulus packages where there was a lot of enthusiasm are now seen stuck in the process. You could look at UK stimulus or the US stimulus as examples. The other issue is a recovery package or an economic stimulus can work at national level if the crisis is at national level. But if the crisis is globally, how can an economic recovery be effective? It's only designed at national level. If there is no close collaboration among leading economies, among G7 economies, among G20, and these countries, advanced economies, have failed to build international collaboration, not only on the economic recovery, but also on fighting the pandemic. The US government stopped funding WHO. And there is no unified international response. So it will make this stimulus dragged. And then another key point is in the economic stimulus, there are 3 key components, and the composition matters a lot. The first one is support to households. This is important for survival of families who have lost jobs. So this is one key element, but the effect will be short and medium term. And then secondly is how do you support firms and jobs? How do you ensure, how do you protect jobs and firms? This requires a different type of support. It means this can only be done through boosting demand. If you want to help automotive industry, then maybe the government can provide 500 or 700 euro to each buyer to support the industry. So this is tricky. It's not going to be handout. So protecting jobs and firms requires different type of intervention. And here also the critical point is, are you supporting two companies which are productive, or are you supporting ailing companies? This is also a critical dimension. Then last, from the long-term perspective, what matters is whether this economic stimulus channels fund to industries which are future-oriented, which are going to create and promote and enhance innovation and technology. And this has not been the case in most countries. There is a very good example in Germany. The German government has targeted new industries. In the US, despite this bipartisan proposal that focuses on technology, but the bulk, more than 90%, is on the other areas. So my view is the impact of stimulus is going to be slow and is going to be limited. On the technology war, it's going to be much more fiercer, and it's obvious. I mean, this is, we have to see it from an international political economy perspective. In the coming 10 years, or by 2030, China is going to be the largest economy. And the United States is going to be the second largest economy. China is catching up in terms of technology. In some industries, China has been able to lead. However, the US is a formidable innovation, oriented economy. So the coming years will determine how this leadership will be protected and how China will be catching up. However, the key damage is the contention in the technological frontier is spilling over to the other areas. To textile, for instance, US companies, brands are instructed to limit their sourcing from China, to make it maximum 30% from China, which is not realistic. So this spillover is going to affect us. And as I indicated earlier, if we listen to Secretary Pompeo's speech, it's very, very disturbing. It's exactly the song of the Cold War. And this is going to affect Africa, because Africa has to engage with its traditional partners like Europe, with the US, and it must engage with emerging economies, with Turkey, with India, with China. It has to diversify. But we have seen temptations that warnings are given to African countries not to engage with China, which is totally unacceptable. And African governments should put their voice and put their sovereign rights to conduct economic ties with diversified partners. The key principle we have to advocate is also the United Nations principle. And these United Nations principles should be abiding, and this continent should try to focus on it. For Africa, it's also important that we have a multipolar economic system or power system, and a unilateral power system. It is not going to give space to this continent.
We'll have to leave it there because of time, but thank you once again for your keynote address, which will certainly be a valuable input into all of the proceedings of the forum. And apologies to all of those whose questions couldn't be addressed. There were quite a lot of them, but hopefully these are issues that can be taken up in the various sessions of the forum. We will now be going for a tea break. It's the time when usually people would be having snacks and networking and so on, but now it's every person for themselves. And people can remain online and return back at 11:30 or close thereafter. So usually we would end with a round of applause for the keynote speaker, but I think you can take it that there's an appreciation from everybody who's been listening in. So we'll conclude the session on this note. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. And I'm planning to attend the session after the tea break. So I will be listening to the presentations and moderation. I again remind everyone, try to get the free download of African economic development, a lot of examples from South Africa, from Ethiopia, and a lot of issues to be debatable. So I wish you happy reading if you can download it.
Thank you.